us. This is the third episode in this Go Digital series, webinar series that we have designed. And as promised, this is going to be an exciting session today. We're going to have conversation with Ken. Ken has immense experience in the publishing industry. He can share a lot of his experiences and his views and where things are going. There's a lot for us to learn and a lot for us to talk. So without much ado, Sameer, you want to start off the conversation with Ken?
Ken, thank you so much for being with us this morning, this afternoon, evening here.
It's good seeing you.
Good seeing you. And I think I've known you for a long time. We've been in the publishing industry. For us, for me, it's almost close to 2 decades. You even longer. And you know, we've seen a transformation that's happening, you know, in publishing over the last 20, 30 years from print to digital. Maybe, and your experience is fantastic, you know, working with some of the most respected names in the industry. Just maybe just a quick summary of what you've seen when you started and where it's all come to now. And, you know, so maybe just a quick, you know, that transformation that we've seen over the last 25 years in publishing. Your perspective.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey. In fact, I'm surprised that you still have such a nice head of hair. Well, mine is almost all gone now after all of these years. Maybe it's from pulling out my hair with all of the change. But when I first got into this, I was at Random House, or at Bantam Doubleday Dell, which later became Random House, and the big theme at the time was enterprise systems. So planning and control systems about how do you manage a workflow? How do you manage the business from almost an ERP perspective? And that still goes on today. But what's interesting is these things never really finish. You just end up stacking new things onto the layer cake. So first off, it started with planning and control systems. Then we started to see digital really get into the workflows with desktop publishing, with XML first, all of the kinds of different types of typesetting, moving from old typesetting systems, even linotype systems, and then moving on into desktop publishing, et cetera, et cetera. So that was kind of the next step. We were still working on physical products at the time. Then e-commerce came along. So again, it was still purchasing of products, physical products, but via digital means. So Amazon was a big innovation at the time, and they continued to innovate and cause all kinds of opportunities for us along the way. And then we started to see the digital products finally come in. So ebooks, first with, I'd have to say the Rocket ebook and Nouveau Media, then the Kindle. Amazon introduced the Kindle, and that has just continued to move along. And now in education, for sure, we see a tremendous amount of attention on courseware. So we've gone all the way from like back office planning and control to workflows, to customer-facing e-commerce, now to digital products. And I gotta say, it's been exciting. The new digital products that are adaptive and personalizable and all of this sort of thing are really, you know, I don't know that we would have imagined that, you know, 25 years ago. Maybe we would have, but it would have been science fiction at the time.
I think, I mean, what you just described, you know, all the different elements where, you know, technology started moving them and changing them. I think, you know, publishing has definitely been a lot slower in terms of adoption of technology, but we're seeing, I think it's now ready, because yes, it's taken a long time for everything to be, you know, integrated in terms of technology, back office, front office, delivery. But so it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be exciting for our conversation today. But maybe before we jump into that, you know, Wiley's well-respected brand in publishing in multiple segments of the publishing market. Maybe just talk a little bit about the Wiley business so the audience can understand what Wiley does.
Certainly. We've got four divisions. The largest is the research business that focuses on research and journals. That business is doing quite well. Another business we have is Wiley Education Services, or WES, that helps universities move their programs online. So they've worked with a number of brand name universities to bring MBA programs, law programs, what have you, into their operating realm. That, I think, is going to end up being a pretty important part of the future, particularly accelerated by the current COVID crisis. The third is our WLS operation. They do corporate learning. They do also some of the personality profiling, like how do you work with others. The DISC profile is a Wiley brand. And they focus on soft skills and other kinds of skills in corporations. And then finally, there's academic and professional learning that has the higher education, trade, test prep, and reference businesses, along with some K-12 out of Australia. So we really do cross most of the book publishing sectors, and handle them pretty comprehensively.
Great.
With all the digital, while we come to the whole digital conversation and the wide mix of business that you're seeing, so what has been the impact of this COVID pandemic situation, and what are the things that you're doing to cope? Because that's one topic of interest. Many of the attendees would like to know, as publishers, what's Wiley doing? How is it handling this kind of situation? So maybe some thoughts on that.
Yeah, there are several dimensions to this. The work from home adjustments are, I think everybody in the world is going through that, which I think is going to be the business mode of the future. I'm not sure that I'd really like to be in commercial real estate right now, given where everybody's at home. When you think about it, this is pretty similar to distance learning, and it requires new soft skills. It requires how do you focus? So when you've got all these distractions and you're not in an office, how do you focus? A big issue for our students. And video collaboration. So, as you're working or multitasking or what have you, how do you operate with the camera on you all the time and really have these conversations? It is interesting. I used to be on phone calls and conference calls just all the time. Now they're all video conferences. And it really brings that extra dimension to be able to see somebody's face and see how they're thinking about what you're saying. So new soft skills are definitely a factor. When I think about the acceleration of distance learning, this is one of the big, the big areas that we've been focused on. And the difference is, so this is driving a lot of change in a very short period of time. When students are separate from professors and from each other, it's really important to have engaging material. It's really important to supplement the collaboration, the ability to have those conversations back and forth, particularly depending on what discipline you're in. If you're in composition or something like that, that doesn't have a strong digital backbone, then the video collaboration is really, really key. There's been a lot of discussion recently about assessment and how do you keep students from cheating, or how do you determine whether students are cheating. I think some of the current research is saying that self-reported cheating hasn't changed from online or from in class to online, but that's not the usual take that a professor might have on that. And discussion boards as part of that collaborative, those collaborative tools are pretty important. Video capture, supporting lab work in science is another big one. When you don't have access to labs, how do you learn don't mix these things. And so, so science labs are really increasing in popularity. And then finally, just from a business perspective, the COVID crisis itself has done wonders in driving trials of the software. Now we'll see what happens when it comes to the fall and see whether that turns into adoptions and then units. But the whole sales process and the account management process has changed. Accessibility has become an increasing focus. You know, as institutions adopt our courseware, in many cases they're required to demonstrate that courseware is accessible. So that's a big feature as well. But a lot of this is waiting for the fall just to see what happens. It's looking reasonably promising right now, but again, we'll just have to see. Meanwhile, print is down. It's definitely down. The channels that people would buy physical books through, they've all been closed. So the shift to digital is definitely happening much more rapidly than we would have expected otherwise.
I think, I mean, this whole work from home, and we got thrown into this ocean of video conferencing, I think. And I look at video conferencing, and I think about when the internet came along and the first web pages, right? Look at that and where it is today, or the first iPhone versus where it is today. And I look at, video conferencing, Zoom, that's what we're using today, and it's so primitive. It's literally, four of us here on this screen, and really we can't engage. So the tool sets, I think over the next couple of years with, virtual reality and glasses, there's going to be a lot of innovation that's going to happen because of what's happened with COVID. So I'm really excited about that. I think
now I don't know whether this is a rumor or not, but I've just read something in the news about Apple working on glasses. So I had to double check to make sure it wasn't a satire website, and I might have been fooled anyway. But it is interesting that Apple is following in Google's footsteps, and who knows what kind of creativity is going to come out of these.
Yeah, I think so. There's definitely going to be a lot more. I think we're early, like web. When the websites came along, the first websites, primitive, just basic text. And I look at this as basic text, and so really, I think there's going to be a lot more innovation. But let's just dive straight into digital transformation in publishing, Ken. What do you see because of what COVID's done? You've talked about the transformation that happened in the last 25 years in terms of technology, but what do you see this digital, the disruption of the publishing business, digital transformation, next couple of years, just within publishing?
Well, all businesses, to be successful, need to really focus on what their customers are doing and what their customer needs are. So for us to be successful, let me talk about education publishing. We have to focus on what's going on in the classroom and with the institutions. And I have to say, it's a big unknown right at the moment. There's been a lot of research over the past several years about how digital is causing a kind of a fragmenting of the different services that universities provide. So there's the whole maturation and socialization of taking high school students and turning them into adults. There's the whole taking them from high school students and turning them into effective professionals. Those sorts of things versus the residence experience, the academic experience, the kind of the hands-on, like on-the-job training sort of experience. I think we're going to start to see those kind of unwind or like unbraid into different offerings. I'm concerned about the kind of the schools that don't have the huge reputation. If Harvard and Yale and MIT and of course, I got to say Georgia Tech and all of these different institutions that are well known in their field start offering distance learning that's equivalent to in class, and they are able to scale it from several hundred students in a class, or from 30 students in a class to several hundred or more. You got to wonder what's going to happen with the overall customer base that we're working with. Now, what we've done is we're focusing a lot of attention on the learner themselves to make sure that the experience is engaging and they actually learn. So you can test, what are the signs that somebody's going to do well or not do well. It's just fascinating. One of the biggest indicators of whether somebody's going to do well is, do they turn in the first homework assignment on time? And you can tell this sort of thing like right away, and you can do an early assignment, and then you can tailor remediation, and you can provide tools to the instructor to spot the students that are having difficulty with any particular issue. So it's just a brave new world in a good sense. Well, actually, we don't know yet whether it's just going to be a brave new world. It'll be difficult for some, and maybe not so difficult for others. Clay Christensen talked about what happens to industries when they get a digital backbone and how that drives transformation. And I think what we're seeing is that drive of digital is now like right through the heart of the university. So it will end up causing a lot of transformation. And I think they're still open.
No, I said I personally think that it's going to be positive transformation, because the problem with, that digital background allows personalization, right?
Yeah.
And each individual student learns differently, right? So getting that specific individual attention, how he or she learns, to actually upskill. If we can improve that technology, and give that individual student all the tools for him to learn at his or her mental capability, mental ability, plus have the physical, existing infrastructure that was already there, you're going to come out with a better solution for education. And I think that's an exciting part, I think.
I think it is. And when you look at some of the adaptive learning platforms, like the Newton, I'm sorry about the camera there, the Newton Alta platform, we acquired Newton back about a year ago. One of the things that they do very effectively is look at what the misconceptions are that students have, and are those prerequisite driven, or did they come from some other place? And then they remediate that. That gets right to your point about personalized learning. And then when you put in place, you've got interactives, you've got video, you've got text, you've got all of these different modalities of instruction tied tightly into the assessment. It's just it's definitely a game changer. The other challenge is, of course, there's a work skills gap between college, what people know when they come out of the university, and what they need to know when they go into the workforce. So what we're able to do as well is apply that kind of assessment, bridge that gap, and create effective professionals more quickly as well. So that's another exciting area.
Yeah, definitely. One more question on the this digital transformation and on the publishing side. When the whole ebook came out, those days were exciting days for publishing, and we thought print would disappear and then e would take over, and that never happened. E came, but print also remained strong. But has the COVID, what we've seen with the our publishing customers is, during this pandemic, a lot of the physical world revenues just stopped. So their digital products continued to grow, right? So, and Wiley, what are you guys saying? Has has it impacted the print side of your business tremendously, or has it remained decently strong and digital really taken off? What have you guys seen?
Again, on the education side, we've seen print declining for years through the various higher ed publishers that I've worked with. It's just been coming down over time. And that's because of recycling of print books, either via rental or used books or what have you. What that didn't get it, so that addressed price concerns from the students. What it didn't really get into so much was the effectiveness of learning. We've known that effective intelligent tutoring systems, effective homework systems do accelerate learning. It's really hard to prove, but the general take on it from students and other folks is, if it's well done, it works. If it's shovelware, like just putting PDFs online, it doesn't work so well. The PDF doesn't offer a whole lot of advantage over a book. So this is definitely accelerating that move online. I've seen some work about how different formats, different media replace other media, and the main lesson is they don't actually replace. What they do is they cannibalize and they reduce, but it's like TV didn't really replace radio, and on and on. So I anticipate that maybe what we'll see is the digital learning experience is the main thing in education. And if the student wants, they can decide that they want to print that chapter and then go through and study that. I don't know about how long that massive tome of textbook is really going to last, though, as the primary method of instruction. Certainly not for at the general ed level.
Yeah. One point I want to just highlight before we go to another part of the questions is really, a nugget of information, I think, from an Asia-centric that you might be interested in is what COVID has done. I think the adoption of technology in colleges and universities in Asia was minimal, because you take the professors and the teaching staff, they weren't very comfortable in terms of adopting technology, as digital came. So they resisted, and so adoption was minimal. All of a sudden, when COVID came and universities shut down, the only thing that they could do was go online. So we had this, it was forced adoption.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're a 65-year-old professor, you had to learn how to use an LMS system and had to learn how to teach through it digitally. So, and what they realized is that it works, and it's not as hard as what they thought it would be, and why they resisted before. So we're seeing demand, and I think that's going to change the demand for content products and digital products across the world, where technology hasn't impacted as much. In the US and Europe, yes, digital has been there, but in countries like Asia, it's I think it's going to speed up a lot more because of COVID-19.
Well, I remember discussions from years ago when everyone was talking about it requiring the retirement of the baby boom generation of professors. Now, I'm at the tail end of the baby boom, and I'm not looking forward to retirement anytime soon. But that change, right, people don't like to change. And if they've taught math the same way for 20 years, and they've got a syllabus and they know how to do it, and this is the way it's always been done, and there's no reason, why would they? So one of the things we have to do is make sure that we understand, not only does this have to be engaging and work for the student, but it's also got to be productive and engaging and work for the professor as well. And, I think over the past few years, we've been seeing publishers work through the complexity of how do you set up a course in such a way that you can then deliver it more effectively. And I remember 5 years ago, 10 years ago, some of the effort that went into setting up a course, just, all the different little settings that took place, it was mind-boggling. We had to have staff to help professors do that. But now I think what we're realizing is that there are different pedagogical models that work in different disciplines and that are common to disciplines. And we can set up features in such a way that you can almost, not quite, but you can almost say, I'm going to do this, do these components, not those components, and then you're ready to go. Not quite that easy yet, but it will be.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, so Vinay, I thought probably it's a good point to, point in time in the discussion to see if there are any questions specifically around the digital topic or pandemic or any interesting question that we bring in the audience at this stage.
Dr. Kotesh, I completely agree with you. We do have some questions which have already come in over email from some of the audience. Not necessarily pandemic, but more about knowing about the publishing industry. Well, not specifically addressed to Sameer or Ken, but the whole panel itself. One of the queries is, for a small publisher, how important is it to look at a personalization and adaptive learning? What's your advice?
Yeah, to me that's a really interesting one, and it kind of combines. So here's the main thing is, if you don't have a platform that does that, you can spend millions of dollars on this and not get anywhere. A lot of people have done that. I think for a small publisher, what I'd suggest is finding a partner that has an adaptive engine and can begin to support, your ideas. And then what you do is you go into it much like a lean startup. You avoid the big expenditure, you start small, you see what works, and then you expand on that. And then maybe at some point you come to the conclusion that you can do the technology development and replace the partner. But I'd caution about that. I've been in, every publisher I've been in, as a matter of fact, has jumped into that platform development, and it always costs way more than what's anticipated. Publishers, just when you start out doing software development, they just don't have the technical expertise to do it, and it takes a while to get there. We've done it at Wiley. Actually, all the publishers I've been at now have that expertise, but it is such a painful process. I don't know, Sameer, what do you think?
I think a key word that you said in your response is partner, right? Especially for the smaller publishers. There is, I think the smaller publishers, the question of personalization, it's going to come. So if you're going to play in this industry, you need to at least have a plan of how we get there. And like Ken said, it's about small baby steps getting there, but doing it by yourself. If you don't have the financial wherewithal, as companies like Wiley or Elsevier, you need to have a partner that has strong expertise in the area, experiment with them. So, and I think in this post-COVID era, in this digital transformation, there's so many elements, and it's going to get more and more complex. So you do need to find good partners that can help you, transform. And in adaptive and personalized content, pick a partner that have the platform, because to build a fully integrated platform that can deliver personalized learning. It'll cost you a tidy sum. So having technology that can do it and work with you, and you can take small steps with them and experiment with some products of yours, see the success. At the same time, you get what Ken was saying, the experience, and you slowly get that comfort. So once you get that comfort, you can try to take bigger and bigger decisions. So having that partner is super critical, I think.
Well, and this isn't only for education publishers. I've been in many publishers that have actively started development on ebook platforms, which is just crazy. When you look at how many good ebook platforms that are out there and how many good toolkits like Readium and things like that are out there, it's crazy to think that you're going to, out invent something that is so core to so many different sectors of publishing. So it's really thinking about what you're good at and what you're able and willing to spend, maybe even what you're able and willing to lose if you decide to, go off on your own development path.
Yep. Great.
We'll take one more question before you go into the next segment. I think somebody in the audience would like to know, can you suggest a digital transformation trend which publishing businesses need to adapt to the new normal?
So there's an acronym called, I've always called it SMAC, SMAC, which is interesting. If you turn the letters around, it could be scam as well. And it might have been a scam from strategy consultants a few years ago. But some of the trends that you need to think about, those SMAC trends are social, mobile. Oh man, I'm blanking on it. And C is cloud. So maybe you guys can help me out with what the A is there. But really, what's that?
Adaptive?
Let's call it adaptive. I don't think that's what it is, but maybe it's analytics. It's analytics.
Yeah.
So what you've got to do is think about all of those as big drivers of everything that you do. So in education, so social learning is very important. So you have to figure out how to support that. Mobile, will it work on phones, iPads, or is this something that has to be just a PC experience? Analytics, that drives the entire adaptive experience and the personalization experience. It involves linking into gradebooks, et cetera, et cetera. And cloud means it's present everywhere so that you can access your material and your learning kind of universally. It really allows quick rollout of functionality and quick rollout of content. I don't know if that gets at what the questioner was looking for, but those are some of the things that I think about. There are other ones like it has to be accessible. So the platforms have to be accessible. They've got to be, your content has to be interoperable, discoverable, maintainable, all that sort of stuff. But those first four are pretty critical.
And I think that's if you think about it, that is a trend that you can't, as a publisher, you can't get away from. So if you don't have those key parts figured out in your business, you're gonna have a tough time.
One interesting thing that we've seen on the digital content side of things is the internet and the technology around it really allows closer collaboration with authors as well. So it used to be somebody would submit a manuscript. It would go through copy editing. That would go back to the author. It would come back. It would then get paged. It would then go back to the author. It would then come back with corrections. Back and forth, all with like markup and PDF and all the rest. Well, these days, you can actually have a development platform in such a way that the author puts in the manuscript. It automatically goes through and determines, well, you're missing these images, you're missing this kind of reference, et cetera, et cetera. It can determine via natural language processing, what level of copy editing is required. All of this can be done off of the same content, and it just dramatically speeds and changes the whole production process. So it works on both the customer side as well as the inbound side.
Yep.
In fact, that's interesting segue into the next segment. How has content production changed? What do you see in terms of this whole digital world, and some advice to the publishers, how they should set up, and even the couple of things that I want to throw in there, this whole XML, everybody talks about XML. And then there is this other famous thing everybody talks about, blockchain, blockchain, blockchain. So maybe you just want to link some of this and just talk about content production itself.
Yeah, well, when you begin digitizing your workflow, you have to think of the standards and the APIs that you're going to operate with. And for me, the particular flavor of XML that you choose, perhaps it's XHTML with a class structure that talks about the structure of the book, but that is kind of the content API. And you want to get your content into that pivot format as fast as you can so that you can then drive it out into different output formats. This online submission, the parsing, the structuring, and all the rest, and the styling helps you do that kind of right away. Now, blockchain, on the other hand, is it's interesting. It's also a little problematic too. I see opportunities for blockchain in permissions, where you can use it to take a substantial amount of time out of the process. You can use it for working with freelancers, so that you can determine like what is the rate scale that's applied, and when they do the work, the payments immediately go out, and you're not waiting for all kinds of delays for approval and AP processes and all that sort of stuff. From a publisher's perspective, you got to worry about accelerating your payments because it can mess with your working capital. But nevertheless, I see blockchain as a way to accelerate or make more efficient many of the back end pieces. There have been a lot of experiments on blockchain with respect to distribution of content. I don't know that any of those have really taken off. But then there's also the certifications. You know, as you accumulate your professional resume and you get certification and experience in particular things, maybe this is a very good way to take those certifications with you so that you can show them to future employers. Blockchain is very interesting. I think all the technologies that are coming out, you have to think about them and say, do they really solve a problem that I'm facing right now or that I might face? And then get your mind around it with some thought experiments, and then maybe try some simple experiments to see if it really works out. But don't spend a lot of money on them until you're convinced it works.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Kotesh, you have something to say, or?
No, go ahead.
But I mean, Ken, looking at XML as a content API, it's actually a really good way to put it. I mean, so that you can actually connect it to any system or deliver it in any methods. That's actually the first time I'm hearing that, so it's really interesting.
There's another wrinkle to that. So as your content becomes more useful online than in print, and as you start to get into reflowable text, all of the effort that we go through to make sure that the pages are perfectly formed and that when you hold it up to the light, all the lines line up, and widow and orphan control and all of that sort of stuff, you can begin to relax that, which means that you can apply or you can use some typesetting capabilities of CSS, cascading style sheets, that dramatically reduce the price and dramatically increase the speed with which you can get reasonable pages out. So that's something that folks in production have been talking about for years and years, and now it's finally getting to the point where you can do that. I would avoid some of the more exotic technologies like XSLT and formatting objects and all of that, because what ends up happening is you end up replacing your designers with programmers at a substantial cost penalty. So
yeah,
keep it simple. And there are plenty of open source platforms out there to help with that paging these days as well.
I think on one side it's for production, but I think the other side, XML, or even looking at it as an API. I mean, we talk about AI and personalized learning, right? How do we actually integrate intelligence into the content? So when the content is broken down to XML and you can actually graph the content, and how do you actually layer that kind of metadata around, you know, that granular level of content? You have to do that for personalization, for all the different intelligent things that we want to do with content. So it's really, I mean, we can dive deep into it, and we're doing some, at Impulses, we're doing some great work there, and we're going to have some other webinars around that, but getting to that, going now, publishing has transformed, and we see, and I've seen, like, publishers were publishers traditionally for the last hundreds of years because they could only print books, and that was the only mechanism of actually delivering the knowledge or the content to an audience. But with technology, publishers have been able to understand who they are and then transform into that kind of company. So it could have been they could be a software company, or they could be a clinical tools company, that gives point of care solutions. But we're seeing a lot of publishers, becoming learning companies, and now with this pandemic, e-learning is becoming big, and we're seeing, they're not publishing anymore, they're education companies, and with education and digital becomes e-learning. Can you just talk about Wiley and the opportunity that e-learning has thrown out are you seeing Wiley, the publisher, becoming an e-learning company? How is Wiley transformed, especially on the e-learning front?
Well, so what I see as interesting is book publishing, when you think about it, is a number of sectors, STM, trade, education, etc. And really the only thing that those sectors had in common was the book, was the format. And that's how the industry was defined, around the format. But in reality, it's much more around the customers and what are their needs. And so helping somebody become a professional, moving from high school all the way through to registered CPA, that's where we focus, is on that bridge from university out through becoming a professional. And Brian Napak, our CEO, expresses this over and over again very articulately about that's the essence of what we do, is we provide that bridge so we handle education and we handle research. And even our trade publishing business is really focused on professional education. We don't do any fiction. We focus on business, finance, accounting, technology, those core areas where you really need to have some skills in order to be a practicing professional. I wanted to jump back just a minute. You mentioned the idea of the graphs and how you structure this content in an educational space. The way I think about it, and this is actually another technology that's just kind of revolutionized education publishing, is you think about the network of learning objectives that you have to go through in order to say, have learned calculus. Mm-hmm. And what does that look like? And then you identify what those learning objectives are, and you identify content, assessment, interactives, video, learning objects associated with each of those. And then depending on where a person is in that graph, you can present them with videos because you didn't understand this concept from differentiation, or an interactive to really get it. So that graph structure is absolutely key it's absolutely key to doing education. Turns out that graph structure, the personal graph structure, is also key to marketing in the trade world. You look at people that are interested in particular topics and how they're connected, and then you look at key thought leaders that are connected to a lot of different people like Oprah or whomever. And what you want to do is you want to hit those folks so that they drive that the idea of reading a particular book into that network of concern. And that concept has been around for a while, but it hasn't been until the last several years that it's really practical to pursue it.
Yeah, I think it's an evolution. Some of these things have been around for a while, but the technology capabilities at a cost, especially in publishing, where cost is such an important element. If the technology capabilities cannot be delivered at a particular cost, then innovation is not going to happen in that particular industry. And I think the capabilities have come, and the cost, because of cloud and all the things that we talked about, has brought it down. I think so. I look at this whole graphing and all of that, the intelligence into the content, like where in 2000, when 2006, 5, 6, 7, where ebooks came along, and it was the early days. So these are early days of adaptive, personalized learning, and I think we're gonna have a nice journey over the next.
One of the ideas that I've thought, there have been some experiments in this, is let's say that you have an ontology that covers a particular discipline, and you have a chatbot that interacts with that ontology. You could actually have an agent ask a student something, have the student answer, and then determine whether it's right based on the ontology. Or you could have the student ask a particular question. So I think there was some work done at SRI with Campbell Biology on this a while back, and it was difficult to do. It requires a lot of knowledge engineering, but some of my student projects at Georgia Tech have really taken to take these textbooks, extract the ontology, and then use that to drive intelligent tutoring. Just fascinating stuff.
Yeah, really fascinating. Yep.
Yeah. So last bit of advice before we open up questions. So what do you suggest? How do you? What's your advice to publishers as they start looking at this digital transformation? And it can be pretty overwhelming, right? So with so many things happening, it's so overwhelming. Very interesting. I should talk about this, and Sameer knows who I'm referring to. Sometime back, we were talking to one of our customers, and he says, "Look, I'm in the business of content and books. I don't want anything to do with technology, and I'm just going to keep away from it." So he invested in technology for quite some time, and then he said, "No, I just don't want to do anything with technology. It costs too much money. It costs too much pain. I am just a content producer. I'll produce content, and somebody go buy it and figure it out how to sell it," right? So that's one extreme thought, right? So what's your quick advice to publishers, how they can start, and so on? Yeah.
Well, so what I would say is that publisher wasn't thinking very clearly about what business he or she was in. Really, you're in as a trade publisher. You could do many things. Entertainment. You could be in all kinds of different businesses. So what you've got to do is you've got to understand who your users are and what they care about. And I think the publisher probably did. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been successful. He or she wouldn't have been successful in the first place. But they were confused with the format. And so as your target audience begins to shift how they consume things, maybe they're older. My mother found the Kindle as just the great tool, because you could expand the type. She didn't have to go to the bookstore. When she finished one book, she could get another one. Of course, it was hooked to my credit card, so I saw all this coming through. And it was just a great boon. So as your customers begin to shift what they want, you kind of need to be there. Yeah, a few more points. So be customer focused, be data driven. Look at the lean startup methodology. So I have an expression, big bangs make big holes. So don't just go in and replace your ERP system. Don't just go in and invest in an entire e-commerce system that you've got no idea whether it's going to work or not, and whether you're going to be able to compete with Amazon. Start small, try things, figure out how to I've said this already, figure out how to leverage partners to help you do that because they've already made the investment. And then just watch and see what the results are, and very deliberately determine what are the metrics of success, and very deliberately do experiments to see whether you can get those metrics to move up or down, and then just keep moving in the direction to expand them. That's the biggest advice I'd have, is just avoid those big bangs and figure out how you can determine whether a strategy is a success with a few experiments.
Excellent. So, Sameer, you also have a lot of experience in working with many different publishers. Your thoughts on
Sameer has done this with Impulses. Sameer has done this very thing. I mean, I remember the conversations when many years ago when you were thinking about, like, what should we get into? How can we try this stuff? So
yeah,
I'm
I think
interested in what you have to say too.
we talked quite, when the whole digital book revolution came about, and that was like 9-10 years ago, and we're sitting now at another major transition point in publishing. So it's really exciting. But going back, Kotesh, that publisher and what he really, I think it's very super important for the publisher to understand the soul of their company. What do they stand for, and what is their expertise? And that particular publisher understood their what they're good at. But I think what that publisher didn't really do and think through is a long-term impact of that decision. So, understand that digital is here for good, and it's going to keep on. Digital is going to get stronger and stronger. So I think that publisher did a good job in understanding what they're good at, but I didn't look at it from a much longer time period, and they needed to be ready for that longer time period. So first piece of advice is really understand who you are as a company, and what do you do. Once you know that, figure out how digital is going to play a role in that, and what kind of products, like Ken said, does your customers need to actually deliver on who you are. And that really means that if it's digital, it means partnerships. You will need partners. Companies like ourselves at Impulses, there's plenty of partners, companies that are good at different elements of digital transformation. So pick the right partners that have the right values, and this is a long-term journey. It's not doing one project. These digital products are, products that are alive and living. They're on the cloud. They're not like how products were historically, where it was packaged, you put it in a box and you sent it, and maybe you got tech support calls on that product. These are products that are alive on the cloud, that must be available 24/7, must be protected from all the harm that's there in the world. So you need a partner that has all those expertise to actually build those digital products. And I think what's really exciting for all of us, and what we talked about in the last 45 minutes, digital is the future. And there's just so much we can do, and there's so much opportunity. But to actually capture some of that opportunity, I go back to what Ken said: don't make those big holes. Dip your toes in the water, see if it's warm, then put a bigger part of your feet in there, and then really get the experience. And we've seen so many companies, so many of our customers who 10 years ago or 7 years ago just had a website as their digital presence, and today they have multiple digital products catering to multiple needs for their customers, and really change their business around. So it is not easy, but with the right thought, with the right intention, understanding who you are, with the right partners, there's tremendous opportunity ahead of us. So
Very true.
Thank you. So Vinay, I know we kind of, I don't know if Ken is in a rush, but maybe we can take a couple of questions.
Sure, Kotesh, that would be great. Ken, if you could answer a couple of questions which are pouring in now. This one is specifically for you, Ken. We do believe that we have an advantage over other industries. Having said that, in your partnership experience with us, what is that one thing that you think we should be doing differently to thrive in the market?
So this is Impulsus,
Yeah.
or this is education publishing?
I would say more from our education publishing or even from an Impulse's point of view.
Well, it's the same answer, is really focus on your customers and then figure out what it is they need to be successful and then provide it. And then you'll have a hypothesis or an opinion of what that is. Figure out some way to test it really fast without any money. There's a great book called The Lean Startup by Reese that really gives you a perspective on that, some of the metrics around that, and how do you think creatively about testing those hypotheses. So again, the focus is on the customer and what do they need and how can you deliver it.
Great. One more we have from David. He would like to know, has anyone pitched augmented or mixed reality solutions to replace the physical classroom? Has this come on our radar in recent times?
Yeah. So this, comes up from time to time. And I got to say that there has been no traction around this whatsoever. It's fascinating. You can see where it might be useful in situations where you can't teach people whatever it is without some sort of immersion. So maybe being a surgeon, although people learn how to be a surgeon for a long time without it. Being a firefighter, being an EMT. There are a lot of different areas, maybe being an astronaut. There are places where it's either too expensive or too dangerous to teach people in real life. So those are areas where I think it makes sense. You can certainly get intuition better from some of the AR VR tools that I've seen, like how does momentum really work for kids. But at the same time, you got to think about what the cost of delivery is. And if it requires, special headsets that you've got to have 30 in a classroom or 200 in a classroom, then it's just not going to happen. It can provide a lot deeper and richer experience, but you got to think about who's going to buy this and how are you going to deliver it, and then do the ROI on it. I think it's fascinating and something that we keep an eye on, but it has not proven successful, and there have been many flameouts in this world around AR and VR.
Sure. We have one more question from John Smith. He would like to know, in accelerating distance learning, do you see school, university, or education changing permanently due to the impact of this ongoing situation that we are all facing?
I do. I see this as being that digital backbone that transforms the university. And I see it having a bigger impact kind of the older the student. So in very early, like pre-K and kindergarten, first grade, second grade, the focus is socialization. And that is really hard to do via distance learning. And parents that have been going through the homeschooling with COVID certainly understand that better than anyone. It is difficult to get children that age to pay attention, and we really do need to value our teachers a little bit higher for what they're able to do. And as you move along and get more mature, you're able to self-discipline, remove the distractions, focus more. But even students coming in from high school to university, they're used to having to do homework and having people like follow up and do all that sort of stuff. When you get to university, that doesn't happen so much. And there's a big transition in that year right there. So I think we're going to see some permanent changes in the university, and maybe less so back down into early K-12. Now, I could be entirely wrong about that. K-12 is not my area. That's just an observation I think that many people would share.
Well, we have about a couple of more questions and a couple of minutes to go, Ken. And for all the audience and participants, feel free to ask your questions right away. We have one from Kevin. I hear blockchain talked about in many conferences. Do you think it could play a role in publishing rights, royalty, or anything on those lines?
Yeah, and so we're experimenting with it on the rights side to take time out of the whole research. In the past, you come up with a permissions log of things that you want. You send them out to get negotiated. You don't really have the rights in many cases until you've paid. So if you're able to, if you're able to close that transaction earlier via blockchain, you've just saved a number of days out of the process. Excuse me. Maybe when we get into recombining our content, then we'll see blockchain work for royalties as well. But I think that's still a ways off.
Hey, Cam, what do you think? I mean, the ways off blockchain with blockchain. When do you think that blockchain becomes permanent part of our our industry or for doing business? I mean, it is experiments. It is we've been talking about blockchain for the last 5 years. And when do you think? How many years? 5, 10 years, where it becomes part of our technology stack to do things and execute on our business?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm able to handicap that one. The thing is blockchain is essentially a distributed database where you've got multiple partners and multiple, it's like a network of transactions. It's always cheaper to keep that data centrally. When you look at the cost of mining, of doing blockchain, it's a really, really expensive way to do a database. And unless you need that kind of distributed access and that immutability, it's hard to justify. So, what I'd suggest on this is just look at what blockchain does. So it's a distributed database, universal access, immutability. And then ask yourself, does this make sense in this application? There was I heard some CIOs, CTOs talking about this at a conference a while back. And that's kind of the take they had. They were arguing both sides of the equation. And I don't think there's been the killer app for blockchain. Well, maybe Bitcoin is, but I haven't seen the killer app yet in publishing, although I'm really interested in it. And I keep asking and keep thinking about it and listen to people when they come with blockchain proposals. But I haven't seen anything that's just going to knock the ball out of the park yet.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that guy, by the way, that said there's only a market for 5 computers in the entire US. So I could be totally wrong about this, but that's the way my take on this is.
But I think certification and having a blockchain for that's where I think there's going to be something that's going to come up, because especially in that transition from college to professional, and as education gets disrupted, where you don't that 4-year college or that's all going to change in the future, and specific personalized learning where you have skill-based certificates in different areas, and having a place to have your record that anyone can look at. Maybe
well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That meets the requirement. There are a zillion people. There are more and more different ways to get those certifications. Didn't matter so much when you could just send a note to Georgia Tech, like get my, send my records, and many, many different employers. So that kind of meets meets all the criteria in there. So I think you're right.
Last question.
Yep. Before we let Ken go.
Yeah, I know.
Sure, we do have one for you, Ken. Can you please give us some insights more about digital first in planning? What activities should one focus on?
Okay, so let me take this from an education perspective,
Yes.
and particularly educational processes or educational products. So the product development side of things. So what we would do is, launching a new education product is a lot like launching a new business. You want to get some exposure, understand whether there's really a need for it, do a lot of work in the market before you start investing. So there, I would say using those lean startup techniques makes a lot of sense. Ultimately, you're going to get to a point where you have to design what the product's going to be. And there, the way that I'm seeing this is you need to come up with a data structure that ends up looking like a manifest. Like, here are all the assets and here's how they're going to fit together before they even exist. And then you can take one look at that and get, this is your permissions log, go get permissions. This is your illustration log, go get these illustrations. This is what needs to be written. So the author, writes this, or maybe you get collaborators to do it. And then all the pieces, so that's kind of the planning. And then it's really a matter of, like continuing to test this with the market, but you can see how these are coming together into that ultimate product. So what that does is it gives you a dashboard, like an immediate dashboard of how complete are you. If you do schedules for all the different components, you know how long it's going to take. If you're running out of time, you can cut certain things. So that's how I'm kind of seeing planning in a digital first world. That's and that's what we're pursuing with some of our technology initiatives.
Great. Ken, thank you so much for your time. It's been a real pleasure, and I think we touched on a lot of different topics, and we could spend quite a bit of time in each area. I mean, one of the key things for us at Impulsus and a core value is relationships, and I think my personal relationship with you has been over decades now. Can't believe saying it, but then our relationship with Wiley has been fantastic, and it's just starting. And I think that partnership, even though Wiley's a big company and got a lot of technology assets internally, you also need partners, and we look forward to building our partnership with you, with Wiley. And thank you so much for your time today. And I think our audience really learned quite a bit, and your experience definitely was a great asset and a great hours well spent. So.
Well, we've certainly benefited from the partnership. I've benefited from the relationship and partnership over the years, and I'm looking forward to many more conversations of the sort. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Sameer, and thank you very much, Ken, for a very engaging session. That's all from our side. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.